All right, I'm so excited today to share space with Orly. We've talked over email so many times, and I've followed her work for many years as someone that cares deeply about kindness, compassion, mental health, and a whole lot more. To introduce myself, my name is Houston. I'm one of the co-founders of Character Strong and an advocate for kindness and mental health in this world. Today, I'm joined all the way across the world in Israel by Orly. What are you up to? What's your favorite way to describe yourself?
First of all, Houston, you're a rock star. I just want to say that first off, that has to be said. So how would I describe what I do? I always say, that I would characterize myself as just a lover of people. I feel like my job is to fall in love with people more and more each day, which is a pretty awesome job to have. But I run a nonprofit organization called Life Fest Inside, whose mission is to inspire, empower, and educate people of all backgrounds to lead a life of kindness. But our core, our essence is all about empowerment, empowering people to recognize their value, that they matter, that they're unique and significant, and that each and every one of us has something that we can contribute into this world that nobody else can. Because if we're living our best selves and we're living our potential, just imagine the amount of innovation, the amount of progress that we can bring into this world.
It's a great frame as we set up our conversation today, which is oftentimes a barrier, right? A barrier to living our fullest life is how we navigate mental health, something that we all have to navigate along the way. So before we dive in, I'm such a believer in common language, and I know this has been your passion for a long time. How do you think about mental health in your own life and in the work that you do?
Well, for me, it's, the concept of mental health, even though over the past years, it's become much more spoken about, which is a fantastic thing, because growing up as an adolescent, really mental health wasn't actually spoken about in any way. And only looking back, realizing the hardships that I went through in my adolescent years, I was dealing with a lot of mental health issues, which I think we all really struggle with at different points in our life. After going through, I had a fire in my house, went through a very dark depression, suicidal dark. Didn't feel that there was a reason for me to be here. Felt very alone. It does something too when your home just suddenly is gone and all of your possessions are gone and your family unit breaks down. It was a very difficult time in my life, and I didn't want to be a burden on my family, so I kept my emotions hidden from my parents, and my friends didn't know what to say to me, so I kept my emotions hidden from them. And you can't do that for very long. When you keep those emotions inside, and you come to believe that you're alone in things, that nobody else is experiencing life the way that you're experiencing it, it's a very dark place. Suddenly, it seems like nothing is possible. And you dig yourself into this really deep hole. And that's where I put myself into. And that hole felt extremely lonely, to the point where I just didn't want to continue. I didn't think that there was a reason to continue. I was home from school for several months, and I was a very shy kid, extremely shy, had very low confidence. And I was the kind of kid, even though I was shy, I loved people. So you were absent from school, whether I knew you, didn't know you. I was that kid, copying notes on carbon paper way back when, and, bringing 2 notes the next day. And there I was, home from school for several months, and not one person called. Not one person came by to see if I was okay. And that made me feel like, well, if I wasn't here tomorrow, would it matter? Would it make a difference to anybody? And it felt like the answer was no. And I just didn't want to continue. And I could have really given up on myself. When I'm saying dark, like I said, it was suicidal dark. I was really in a bad place. And I think that had I given up on myself or thrown in the towel, I don't think anybody would have judged me. But, generally when we're in these moments, these very hard moments, and we're struggling with our own mental health, we're in a sense being pushed against the wall. And sometimes in those moments, we really have the ability, it actually pushes us to tap into something that maybe we wouldn't have been able to tap into. Now, that's not to say that mental health issues are a good thing. The question is how we deal with them. I was very lucky, and I don't know if we'll be able to have a chance to go through really my deeper story of how I got out of that. But I think that the fact that people are speaking about this, and the stigma, in a sense, has gone away. It allows people to heal. When you know that somebody else is going through an experience that you've gone through, suddenly that feeling of loneliness, that feeling of impossibility to overcome falls by the wayside. And that's really a very big inspiration behind an initiative I created called Project Hope Exchange. I don't know if you know about that initiative. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite initiatives that gets like the least, visibility. But it's the whole idea. What is hope? When you're giving a message of hope to somebody, you're really speaking to yourself. Think about it, right? When you give somebody a message of hope, generally you're really thinking of, well, what would I want somebody to tell me in that situation? We're speaking to ourselves. And one of the best ways of getting hope is actually by giving it. And through Project Hope Exchange, what we do is we collect, aggregate, and share 30-second anonymous audio messages of hope from people that have been through adversity to others that are currently going through that same adversity. Because when you're going through a hardship, the last thing you want to hear is somebody telling you, oh, it's going to be okay. But it's not okay. And it's not. And when you hear from somebody that's been there or may very well still be there, it speaks to you in a different way. And so you're able to go onto the platform, leave a 30-second anonymous message based on an adversity you're facing. All the messages are then categorized, or you could go on and click on whether it be physical health, mental health, life challenges, and you can hear 30-second anonymous audio message from somebody that's gone through what you're going through. And suddenly, even though you don't know them, there's a little bit of light there, a little bit of light at the end of that tunnel. And when a person sees that light, to me, that's everything. That's what keeps you going. So I think the ability for people to connect and to recognize that they're not alone in those emotions is extremely important, for our well-being. Mental health is just as important as physical health, but we oftentimes don't pay attention to it in the same way.
All of that, I have so many things to reflect on. And first of all, I feel grateful for your ability to articulate what for so many, it's anxiety or depression can feel like. I think even to be able to articulate it makes people feel less alone. Like, oh, I know exactly what that feels like, to have my back up against the wall, to feel like my friends won't know what to say. I don't want to be a burden, right? All of the many times lies that we tell ourselves that prevent us from connection. I love the premise that like when we're privately afraid, that's one of the loneliest feelings of all. But the ability to share what that fear is, all of a sudden, like public fear invites opportunity for connection. And that distinction between advice and connection being such an important one, that hope is not necessarily advice giving. It's just simply being with someone and recognizing that we're not alone in this thing. So I'm so interested in that story of who came into your life, what came into your life that did help you navigate your way out. What was hope for you?
I'll tell you, it was such a dark time. I remember I was sleeping most of the day, crying the rest of it. And, it was one of those years where everything that could go wrong went wrong. And when you thought it couldn't get worse, it got worse. I mean, my dad had lost his business. I only found out years later that there was hardship putting even food on the table. I mean, my family, we were moving around for 6 years until we lived under the same roof. I mean, I was a junior in college when we finally lived under the same roof. It was a completely different person. But that first year was the hardest. And I was always a very positive person, believing everything happens for a reason. But again, when you see your world, like those people that are your family, your home, this break down, my God, it felt so dark. And not having anybody there felt even just more dark. And I was angry at everyone. I was angry at the world. I was angry at God, angry at my friends. And I would have to say the truth of the matter is it was faith that got me through, to be very honest. Because I was angry at God, but I was screaming at God. I had that conversation. I was really angry. I felt so alone. Like I'm always there. Why is nobody there for me? That's what it just felt like. And I also had an issue with trusting people. That, when somebody comes up to you, you're looking really down. Somebody comes up to you and they ask you, oh, are you okay? And you say, yeah, no, I'm okay. I'm okay. It's a strong, tough exterior. And in your heart, you're saying, please don't stop asking, please. And then they would stop asking and they'd walk away. And I'd prove to myself, you see, they don't really care. I would play that game with myself. I didn't trust that people really cared, that they were just paying lip service to ask that question, but they didn't really actually want to hear what I had to say. And the more I had that distrust in people, the more it was proven to me. And I totally isolated myself, and I was forced to go back to school after several months, but I wasn't the same kid. I remember I was like sitting in the corner, just very morbid, dressed all in black. I had my one notebook that it was just It was me and myself. I didn't care about my grades. I didn't care about school. I didn't care about smiling. I just didn't want to be associated with anyone or anything. And I was just there to pass the day. And one morning, I'll never forget this. I was waking up and I was getting ready for school, and I was in the bathroom and I was staring at myself in the mirror. I had this like aha moment, staring myself in the mirror, looking into my eyes, and I didn't see myself. I didn't see that young Orly that dreamed of changing the world, because the work that I'm doing right now in kindness, I mean, this is part of a dream I had since I was 4 years old. Like, I was that kid that talked about wanting to change the world from 4 years old, and people thinking I'm absolutely nuts. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I didn't see her. She was gone. It's like somebody stole her. And I saw this shell of a person looking at me, and that scared me to death. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to pick myself back up out of this. I really don't know. And I made a promise to myself. And I think, the promises that we make to ourselves are really, really special. There's a promise that guided me to my years teaching later on in middle school, and guided me to the work I do with Life Vest Inside. And it's actually a promise that wakes me up every morning. And it was a promise to be there for people the way that I wish somebody would have been there for me. To see people the way that I wish somebody would have seen me. And those next couple of years of high school were really tough, sort of walking alone. I didn't have a crew. That's tough. I mean, walking across the lunchroom in high school is tough when you're walking across hundreds of kids, that feeling of anxiety and but it gave me a chance those 2 years to do something that most people don't even get to do as when they're adults. It gave me the chance to fall in love with Orly for Orly, not because I wanted to impress that group or I wanted those people to think I was cool. I got a chance to fall in love with me for me, because really no one was there for me during that time. Not because they didn't necessarily want to be there for me, because I didn't know how to let them be there for me. Even though I really truly loved people and I was always a giving person, my giving wasn't coming from a positive place. It wasn't coming from a place of abundance. It wasn't coming from a place of me recognizing my own value. Therefore, giving was coming from a place of weakness. It was coming from a place of sacrifice. And those next 2 years of seeing my own self and loving who I am for me helped me find and tap into my voice, because I was this shy kid that wouldn't talk. I wouldn't even raise my hand in class. I was so beyond shy. Now they can't get me to shut up, but I couldn't. I was so shy. And I'll never forget, my senior year of high school is the beginning of senior year, and we were on a seminar, like a school seminar for the weekend. We were sitting in a circle and the teacher was talking about obstacles. And I did something I never did before. I raised my hand. And for the first time, I shared something inside of me of what the experiences that I went through. And these kids that I was so super intimidated from, were listening to me and then coming to me afterwards and asking me for advice. And what I found was that the more I gave, the more I healed. And the more I gave, the more I healed. And for the first time, even though I had always been a giver since I was a kid, for the first time, my giving was coming from a place of abundance. It was coming from a place of strength, of a recognition that who I am matters. Therefore, I can now give like a candle that can light so many other candles, yet retain its flame. Suddenly, I understood my value. And to me, that is the most important thing in this world. If you're going to look for validation from all external things, you're not going to find it out there. You can only find it in you. And that's why kindness is sort of the medicine for me. Because when you engage in an act of kindness and an act of giving, the reason you feel so good is because in that moment of giving, you're being validated for the right reasons. It's not based on how many followers you have or, how many friends or how many people liked your picture. I mean, those things don't mean anything. They're just a facade. They are so empty. When you're engaging in an act of kindness and you make somebody else smile, you make them feel good, you're being validated for the right reasons. You're like, wow, that feels awesome. And all I needed to do was to just be me and to be okay with that. That takes time for people to get to. So for me, like I said, like faith was a very big part of it. There's a line I say every morning, and I always tell people if there's going to be anything that they remember, I say, just remember this, that, When you wake up in the morning, remember you're waking up on purpose. Whether you believe in God, for me, it's God, if it's you, the universe, or whatever it is that you believe. I always say, if God is betting on me every day that I'm waking up, how can I not bet on myself? When we come to, and for me, my connection, my faith grew even stronger because I was able to overcome. And, when we come to realize that by us being here, there's something that we can bring into this world. We're not here by happenstance. We're all interconnected, and there's something that we're meant to bring. When we recognize that we matter, that our choices matter, we're more likely to make better choices. But the key is to realize and recognize that you matter in this world, and the world is just not going to be the same without you. And that every person, the guy that you follow on YouTube or Instagram, whatever it is, the most popular guy, the most confident guy, even that guy has days when he doesn't want to get out of bed. I promise you. Even that guy questions his value and his worth. Even that guy can cry himself to sleep at night, because we all go through those moments where we question. And that's okay. It's part of our human nature. And the minute that we recognize that we all experience that, something shifts, something changes, and we see other people differently. We see ourselves in them. And that's how we build empathy.
One of the things that stood out to me so much in that narrative, Orly, is the reframing of loneliness, which I think a lot of people demonize, or we frame pretty consistently as a problem. And I would identify, certainly there are elements of it that are a problem, but I think part of the problem is how we know how to experience it. And yes. I think there's something really beautiful that you shared there, which is you went through this chapter of loneliness that allowed you to experience yourself just by yourself, without the constraints of a lot of outward cultural pressure. Without all those connections, you get to face yourself, discover yourself, find abundance in yourself. And when I think about that lens of what families can do for young people who are navigating loneliness, and a lot of the world tells them it's a bad thing, to reframe that is to say, yeah, it can feel hard, but hard isn't always bad.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge that it's hard. It feels like I'm up against a wall. It feels like I have no one to talk to. And as a family member, to share what that experience was like for them, and to share what I learned from that. What did you learn from your chapters of loneliness? Because we are all going to have chapters of loneliness along the way. And so much of it is knowing what to do with those hard moments. I just love that so much, and what you discovered, and how giving can come from a place of obligation versus how giving can come from a place of abundance. And we get to discover all of that for ourselves, whether that's through our faith, whether that's through self-reflection, whether that's through sharing and community. It's such a beautiful reframe. To close out our too short of a conversation, Orly, what would be the two nuggets of wisdom, whether it's a quote, a sentence, a phrase, a mantra, that you think families could offer young people right now who are struggling through disruption, through overwhelm, through anxiety? What would be two phrases?
I think the greatest thing that you can do is to listen, not to worry about having to fix, like you said, right? It's not about fixing the person. We all need to go through these experiences. The work of the heart is the hardest work of all. And this period of COVID, this period of isolation, has forced us to stop the busy work that we allow ourselves to get involved in, and to pause and to do some of that internal work. The greatest thing that you can sometimes do is really to listen, not to listen to try and fix or to advise, but to allow the person to experience what they're experiencing, and to try to empathize with them, to share also your own self, to let them know that it's okay to feel those things, that you also feel those things. Because as adults, kids look at adults and they think, oh, well, everything is okay for them. When they can now see, wow, that adult, my parent, my cousin, my uncle also feels those ways, suddenly it's manageable. So be okay to be vulnerable. Be vulnerable. It's not easy, but actually it's the greatest thing you can do, because it allows those that are experiencing hardships to live in that hardship as well, and to be able to come out of it. You can't fix something for them. A person can only fix something for themselves, but you could be there as a sounding board, as the listening ear. Sometimes that's all I wanted. You know, I would talk to kids like my age and tell them, and they would change the subject because they didn't know what to say, right? We feel uncomfortable when somebody's telling us something uncomfortable. So what do? We try to change the subject. I didn't want them to do that. I didn't need them to say anything. I just needed them to listen. I just needed a space to speak. Open that safe space and allow them to share. There's so much more that you will take out if you just listen a bit more and allow yourself to be vulnerable as well with them.
So good. Yeah, maybe it's not a phrase, or maybe the phrase is, I hear you, or that sounds hard, or tell me more.
It's I see you, you know, more than anything. That's what I always wanted somebody to say to me, or to make me feel that I see you and I hear you.
Orly, thank you so much. I see your heart so clearly in this conversation. I see your passion so much in this conversation. And you're such a gift. Thank you for wanting to change the world since age 4. You're successful. Let's keep it up.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.